Hello, everyone, and thank you for being part of the Intuition Revolution. I'm Kim Chestney, and my very special guest today, Wendy Keller, is an award-winning former journalist, a respected literary agent, an author, a speaker, and acclaimed book marketing consultant. She's the author of 31 books and has been featured on programs like Dr. Phil, Dateline, The Early Show, Hannity and Colmes, Fox, and ABC. Wendy is a creative powerhouse, one of the most fierce women that I know, and I am thrilled to have her here today to talk about the tough questions surrounding intuition and for her to share a little bit about her own truth and how it's led her to live such an extraordinary life. So welcome, Wendy.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kim. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here. And listen, you have led such an incredible life, achieving extraordinary success, and also by overcoming the most powerful challenges. You know, as I was reading about your life story, I couldn't help but think this is a woman who never gave up on herself. No matter what the world brought you, no matter what calamity came along or what people told you or how they defined you, you kept fighting to live your truth. And it's this centeredness on your inner power and this following of the call within us that is at the core of intuitive living. Could you start off by telling us a little bit about your journey and the role that following intuition played in it all?
Oh, thank you. Yes. I would say that the first powerful and memorable intuitive experience of my life started a long time ago. I was in fourth grade. I was living in a suburb of Chicago, and I was in the school library, and there was a turnstile that had the Caldecott and award-winning books. So those are the awards for juvenile books, the Caldecott Medal winners on it. And I was in the library. I was the only student in the library at that moment. For some reason, the librarian was looking at me. There was sun coming through the window, and I reached out and touched the turnstile, and I was looking at the books, and I instantly felt through every cell of my body that when I grew up, I was going to be a writer.
Hmm.
And nothing ever changed. I have stayed in the publishing, writing field my entire life. I'm one of the, quote, lucky ones who figured out what they wanted to do early. It drove and led me in every direction I've taken in my life. That awareness that this is what I'm doing. And there was never a question.
So that's so interesting because a lot of people talk about how they have this calling or this knowing from a young age of something they're aligned to. So you just knew about, so ever since you were young, you just had this sense and this knowingness that you were going to be connected with this literary path.
I knew I'd be involved in writing. That shortly after that, I wrote a story for the school, and I won the district contest. And, for me, it was like, yeah. And, it never struck me as anything unusual that I became successful so early. I was able to get out of high school at age 16 and go to college. And I finagled the local paper to give me their first internship ever in their history. And then I won a scholarship across the entire nation. And it was just like, well, yeah, I mean, it's not anything special. Anybody could do it if they wanted to. And looking back as an adult, I think that's funny that I just, figured out that this was just what I was going to do. And it didn't, and I think that there's a difference between talent and skill, but there's another layer of intuition where it was just this knowingness. And I think some people also come to it later. A lot of writers who come to my agency are now finally, they've raised their kids, or they've grown their business, or they've sold their business, or whatever. And their intuition has brought them to my world because now they want to share what they've got. And I think that's a layer of intuition also, Kim, like yourself. I mean, you're an incredible success story in every way. And now this next book that we're doing together, I mean, the things that could have gone wrong on the path for us connecting are innumerable. But look, it's all working, and you're with a terrific publisher, and your book is being treated as a prized piece of literature by your publisher and is by us. And you've got a great destiny because of this.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. And this whole process that we have been led to and brought to, that I have been in my own way intuitively drawn to. It's almost been it's been an unshakable drive, let's say, for me to do this. So the thing about intuition is once we have that knowingness, then we want to share it. We want to express it. We want to actualize it and bring it into reality. So for me, like making this happen, connecting with you, connecting with New World Library, it was like a part of me inside was literally pushing to me to do it. And even when I was like feeling self-doubt and feeling like, no, I can't do this. No, this is too hard. No, I'm not good enough. All of the things that our mind tells us, all those fears that come in, your intuition sits there and it doesn't let you make excuses for yourself. It doesn't go away, you know, it's still there. And that's one of the things I love about you, because you overcame. There were so many things in your life saying, okay, you can't do this. You know, you were in a very conservative religious background where you were brought up, and
Yes.
women didn't have these roles, these powerful roles, and you are such a powerful woman. So how was that, like living your truth and pushing through on that, even when the world was saying, no, that's not for you, even when you knew deep inside it was?
That was the biggest issue of my childhood, was that I had a destiny, and the cult, as that's what I think it was, the cult that I was raised in encouraged females to not think, not grow, not learn. It was shameful that I wanted to go to college. It was, it was heinous that I wanted to be a journalist. I was at one point shunned by the entire religious organization for my sense of drive and my desire to be a journalist, and so on and so forth. But that was, that was minor. I mean, certainly things that happened later in my life, as you know, were a much bigger deterrent to any level of success and much harder to get through. And I think that the experiences that I had around learning to push against the social pressure I received in my religious environment against my career choice and education choices, I think that prepares us. And one of the things I notice in my life is that when we are tested in some way, or the world pushes against our dreams or whatever, it's usually just be like water, find a way around it, find the key. People sometimes come to my agency and they say, look, you're a stupid idiot. I've been pitching you this same proposal for 12 years and you haven't said yes. What's wrong with you? And and none of your other agents, no other agents will say yes to this. And I always think, well, just freaking modify it. What is typing? Come on, man. It's not even like you had to do it on a Smith Corona. Come on, it's digital. But people want what they want, and they want, like we talked about this previously, they want it in that way, and they want it to show up in that particular package. And if it doesn't, they ignore the universe offering them all the benefits that come from looking at it another way. Sometimes our worst tragedies can turn out to be opportunities in disguise.
Amen. I couldn't agree with you more on that. And on that note, let's talk about you. You and I have had some conversations about intuition, and you've asked me some hard questions about it, especially when it comes to issues of failure and tragedy and suffering and disappointment, and places where our intuition may have theoretically led us astray.
Yes.
And one of the questions that people say to me all the time is like, well, what happens when my intuition's wrong? And my answer to that is always the same thing, is that your intuition is never wrong. Your intuition by nature cannot be wrong, because your intuition is your connection to truth. So if there's something that went wrong, something went wrong in the way we're thinking about our intuition, not in the intuition ourselves. So I would love to talk about some of these questions that you have about how we navigate these mishaps when our intuitive paths don't quite work out the way that we thought they would.
I think that's such an interesting topic, Kim. And one of the things I see in my own life and in the lives of people who approach me to help them become, world famous speakers and authors and whatever, is many times people, like I said, have opinions about the way it should unfurl and they won't take anything else. But also sometimes people will say, well, this book was inspired. And I take one look at it, and as a publishing professional, that ain't inspired to me. That's not where that book is going. I've seen that 400 times this week. Or that's just the dumbest idea I've ever seen. And you can go, well, you're blocking someone's destiny. It's like, well, not really. I'm just expressing what will be true in my industry. And then people can come back and go, well, how can that not be true? For instance, in my own life, sometimes I will get an intuitive hit and I'll be like, oh, this is a great idea. Oh my gosh, I could I could add this to the services I offer to authors and speakers. I'm a genius. Look at this. Oh my God. And it ends up being such a slog. It's so painful. And people don't get what I thought they were going to get out of it, or they don't sign up the way they should sign up. And I see this with my clients. You know, they put all this heart and soul into a book, and then they didn't market it, or something happened, or, you know, and it doesn't turn out the way it's supposed to turn out. And what I'm starting to realize now in my dotage is that probably sometimes, like you said, it's the way we're thinking about it. We think that if we put in this effort, this has to happen.
Right.
There's no guarantee. There's no fine line.
Right.
You know, there's no, this is for sure how it's going to turn out. It might be, it was your destiny to write that proposal so that while you were writing it, you interviewed somebody for the book, and that changed your life.
Yes. And you know, when you're talking about all this, and I have struggled with these same questions throughout my life too, and I had to confront them when I'm doing this work with Intuition Lab, because I want other people to understand it and work through it the way I was able to. So we're talking about the intuitive process, and it's like the creative process. You know, we're talking about writing and coming up with these great ideas and these genius inspired writings. It's the creative process, and it's just that. It's a process, and that's what we forget, because we'll get an idea. And that idea is just the seed. It's the seed of something much bigger. And, you know, for instance, when I wrote I went through the first draft of like the first chapter of my book. I was like, oh, this was so inspired. It's perfect. And then I went back, like I did the Botswana test, and I went back 2 weeks later, and I was like, oh, now I see all these things. I'm like, oh, this isn't perfect. I need to do this. I need to do that, because it's an evolution, right? So we have to keep working at it. And another thing you always say that I love is success is spelled HARDWORK. Right? Yeah. So it's not just about vomiting out some idea and making it be perfect and take off. It's about having this idea and then implementing it and continuing to use your intuition and continuing to refine it and create this thing that eventually turns into, it may not be at all what you thought it was in the beginning. Maybe it takes on a life of its own, and it becomes something else when you let the universe unwind it and help you to co-create it, right? It's a process of co-creation.
Well, thank you for that, Kim. I wonder what you think about someone who has what they believe is an intuitive sense about something. And, you know, maybe it's someone they should date or marry, or maybe it's a big event like that, or maybe it's just a decision about something they should do. You know, don't go this way, you know, don't get on that plane, you know, those kinds of everyday intuitions, and also the really big ones. Why do you think that sometimes, you know, you go, well, that plane didn't crash. That was a stupid idea. Why did I even bother? I'm such a worrywart. Or, you know, people who hear intuition and get on the plane anyway, and it does have some kind of problem, God forbid. So why does that happen?
That is such a good question. And, you know, like we had talked about earlier, I think questions like this, when things like that happen, people tend to start dismissing intuition but what's really happening is that we're not really understanding intuition, right? Because in our minds, there's this interplay, this constant interplay of our intellect and our intuition, and they work together as a unit. They don't oppose each other. It's not one or the other, but we have to have both, right? If we're just in this mental space where we're in our head all the time and we're not listening to our inspired thoughts, then that's unhealthy. But if we also get in this headspace where we're just thinking of all these ideas and we're not using our rational brains, then that's also unhealthy. So the idea is, when we get an impression, like say we get, okay, like maybe I shouldn't get on this plane. Well, it's our brain that immediately says it's because the plane's going to crash. It's going to blow up, right? Because that's our fear. But maybe you're not meant to get on that plane because there's something for you to do before you get on the plane. Or maybe there's a person that you're going to run into on your other flight. Or maybe, you know what I mean? There's a million different reasons that life can see that we can't see from our tiny little human perspective. So that's where trust comes in. We have to start really, but first recognize, once we're sure we understand what our intuition is, and that's what the work that we do in Intuition Lab. Our goal in Intuition Lab is to have every person to be able to know and trust their intuition. So going through this process so that you are crystal clear that this is an intuition. I'm not supposed to get on that plane. I might not know why. That's the key, is we don't ask why. We don't need to know the why. We just know that we have an intuition and we're going to trust it, because we can never fully know the why living in linear time and space with only access to the space around us and the moment right in front of us and the moment behind us. So there's no way we're going to see the big picture. So we have to trust in the life that does see the big picture, and that connection, that sort of download from that super conscious place where all things are known. So when you're making a decision, it's important not to get so attached to the outcomes. Well, if that plane doesn't crash, then my intuition was wrong. No, there's a million reasons why you might not have been meant to get on that plane. So ask yourself, what came to me from not getting on that plane, instead of prescribing an outcome. You see what I'm saying?
Yes. And that gives the other side of it also concern to me, because it feels like, you know, I know someone I'm related to who is afraid of everything, and who makes these grand assumptions that it is always an intuition. I know an author who I mentioned to you earlier, who told me I had to take a deal with a publisher that I didn't think was the right publisher for that person. And we did it. And the author told me, my intuition tells me it's going to be a New York Times bestseller. It's going to sell over 500,000 copies if you sell it to them instead of the equally qualified publisher. And as an agent, my intuition said, you should go with them. But we did what the client wanted, and so my relative, who's afraid of everything and blames and tells everybody else, this is my intuition. Mm-hmm. There's also the other opposite extreme of your intuition is wrong. Why is intuition, or what we call, why do we call things intuition that are really just our will or our fears or something?
Right. Because that's what it is. It's our fears, it's our emotions. And I talk about that there, we have our minds, and we have our thoughts, and we have our feelings, and then we have intuition up here. Don't follow your heart, because your heart will lead you astray. Don't, right? People talk about that all the time, like, oh, follow your heart. No, follow your intuition. Do not follow your heart.
That's so funny.
Right? Because it's like your intuition's like your higher heart. It's your heart from that higher place, not that heart from that need place or that want place or that emotional place, right? So intuition is a lot of times it's associated with the heart, but not because it's emotional, because emotions and intuitions are like kryptonite. You cannot have fears and have intuition at the same time, or you can't have ego and intuition at the same time. If you have a drive, the fact that someone's talking about making $1 million and having all this stuff, so that's probably an ego drive there that can easily cloud an intuition. Whenever our fears are present, it can distort our intuition and make us mistake our emotions for an intuition, when really it's just a feeling. So when you get to an intuition comes from that still place of peace and power. It does not affect us in terms of our personal agendas, our emotions. It just is. It simply is. It has nothing to do with our own personal gain. And, if it helps us, that's great. We like that. But the reality is, it wants to give us the truth to help us get away from these illusions and stop chasing these false paths, and really connect us to what is and the truth and the reality.
So I'm going to challenge you on that. I'm going to give you another example.
Keep them coming. I love it.
All right. I love it. I just adore you. So I have a friend who, now that she's divorced 28 years after she got married, she says, it seemed like a really good idea to marry him. And, we have these wonderful children and so on and so forth, but my life was misery for 28 years. And as I was walking down the aisle, I was telling myself, don't do this, run. It's a bad idea. And I know, at my age, I've heard a lot of women say that. And I think, now, if your intuition is telling you don't marry this guy, and your mind is saying do marry this guy, and because it's so logically perfectly, there's all these good reasons, and you do the Ben Franklin close, and there's like 50 reasons yes and 51 reasons no, or 50 and the other way. It's like, how does someone use intuition and trust intuition enough if everything logical is saying you should do this?
And that's a really great question. And I think that's a question that a lot of people have. And for me,
and I think you know the answer.
I have lots of things to say about that. First of all, because I have been in that position, so I can, in my life, I too have learned the hard way. And with intuition, I always say intuition, you can use your mind and you can follow your pros and cons list. You might learn the hard way, but intuition teaches you that you don't have to. If you listen to your intuition, it saves you
Ooh.
from learning the hard way. And, we've had those times in our lives where we had to fail forward. And intuition is a lot about failing forward. You hear that term in terms of creativity and in business a lot, but it applies to our life. Everything is a learning experience, and intuition's never going to lead you to anything that isn't going to help you in some way, because that's the goal of intuition. The goal of intuition is to help you reconnect with who you are and your personal power and experience the best life that you were made for. That's what our intuition wants for us all. So when we have these, there's a little part of you saying, when you're walking down the aisle, like, well, this isn't going to go great, but you know what, I'm
Too
the
late
ship's
now.
sailing, so I'm
Yeah.
doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna learn the hard way. I've made that decision. Whereas if I had been listening to my intuition for the months ahead, because I'm sure the intuition was there in some place, and this is why developing our intuition is so important, because it is there, but we push it away so often because we're confused about it, or we don't want to hear it, or it's too hard. It's a lot of times the harder path. And then it gets to this breaking point where ultimately, you have to have some sort of breakdown in order to rectify the path. But the earlier you learn to follow your intuition, the easier it becomes, because you don't have to go so far down the path to learn those lessons and to fail forward. You can just step forward and move forward.
That's interesting. I can think of 1,000 questions from that, but one thing that I notice is that in business, right, there's I can think of a lot of personal cases where I or someone I care about made a decision that didn't work out right, and they had said, I'm not sure and this doesn't feel right. And I had a mentor one time who taught me this a quote that I repeat fairly often in my head, and her answer was, if no decision is obvious, no decision is necessary.
Hmm.
Which is to say, to wait until intuition opens the path in front of you. And in as much as I've been able to practice that, uh, admittedly not as much as I could or should have, it certainly opened my eyes. If no decision is obvious, no decision is necessary, because in a lot of cases we're pushing something that
Yes.
isn't quite ready. We're taking the cake out of the oven before it's fully baked in
Mhm.
our lives in some really important ways. If you dated that guy, in the case of my friend, all of us were telling her that he was cheating on her. And if she had really waited a week or a month or a year, she probably would have figured out that that was a bad sign, that 40 girlfriends were saying one thing and he was denying it. There's
Mhm.
a clue there.
Yep.
I think that sometimes we don't want to hear the other stuff.
Yes.
And as an agent, often authors don't want to hear me say, this isn't good enough to sell, or you need more, whatever, this and less of that, or whatever, because it's their baby. And I think we become so attached. So one of the things I'd like to, and I think about a lot, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on, is that when we have invested enormously in something, maybe like a wedding, but I'm thinking about other things in business, and we really want this business to take off. Let's say someone's just starting out as an entrepreneur, or they just started a job and they thought it was going to be so great, and their intuition said, golly, this is the best job ever. And it turns out the boss is a real jerk, or it turns out that the working environment is unhealthful, or there's a lot of negativity, or the person that there's just all these factors. So when intuition says go go go, and you get into something and it's no no no, what are you supposed to do? Start to recoil or retract? Or how do you handle that when you figure out you're in the middle of the wrong place,
Mhm.
even though it looked like intuition was sending you in that direction?
Wow, that is such a good question. That is such a good question. And I think, there's not an easy answer for that, because we all, and I think you speak for a lot of us, because we've all found ourselves at that place in some point in our life where we've gotten ourselves into a mess, into some sort of trouble in our life, even if it's just trouble looks like a normal life that's just not meant for us. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
not our life. And you have a choice. You can just stay in that rut, and you can just live someone else's life and suffer and be unfulfilled, or you can reconnect. Really the goal is reconnecting. Somehow when that happens, you've disconnected from who you are, and you're disconnected from your path. And that's really the outcome, right? Like she
Ah.
she was someone who wasn't the right person for her, but for whatever reason, it felt right for her to do that, and so now she's disconnected. And how do you reconnect? How do you find your power again? How do you go back to that place and sort of hit the reset button and make that pivot to get back on track in your life? And I think the answer really is that practice of insightfulness, of getting into that way of living where you trust yourself. And that's so hard, especially for women, because we are not trained to be powerful and trust ourselves. We're not at that place. I mean, our generations are becoming more and more that way, but to get in the place where we have our own sovereignty, we don't have to rely on anyone, we don't have to listen to the outside world, and that we trust that what we're guided to is the right thing for us. And part of that is learning to understand your intuition, because like we said earlier, we don't want to go crazy and just go off the rails either, right? But
Mm-hmm.
knowing this path and getting back in touch with who you are, and it really is a spiritual process. It is a personal growth process when you make mistakes and you learn from them. But your intuition is always there to guide you back, no matter how far away we go on our path, or how far deep into the darkness we end up going. In the light of intuition is always there, because it's always reaching out that hand to say, here's something, if you just listen. And that's what intuition is all about. It's just about listening. And that's what's so easy about it. You don't have to make a pros and cons list. You don't have to strategize. All you need to do is just be open to it. So the short answer I'd say to that question is just to be open to the next idea, be open to the next calling that comes to you, to make some positive change, or to find that strength, or to find that clarity that you need to really regroup and get back on your center and be the person that you're meant to be.
Thank you for that too. I think that's really helpful. I noticed that in my own life at times of extreme duress, and also in the lives of my friends, that there's a tendency to delegate intuition to third parties like tarot cards or the I Ching or fortune tellers or psychics, or and I represent a lot of people who are self-identified as psychics. That used to be a popular book topic, etc. And my observation of all of that is that sometimes it's a really hit or miss. And the part that irritates me about it, as a person who's interested very much and has spent a lot of time with the I Ching, is that, if it doesn't work out the way it looks like it's going to work out, you can always say, well, at that moment, that's what was being forecast. And what I'm starting to realize finally is that possibly we can't delegate intuition. What do you think about that? Can you go to somebody and have the psychic say, yes, it's in the stars, your palm says you're going to be happy forever, or whatever it is?
You really have just hit on the core of my whole journey as an intuitive person. And I very much echo your sentiments. And when my first book came out, The Psychic Workshop, and I was a young psychic, I was just learning all of this intuitive stuff. And this was all really new to me. At that point in my life, I was still working with clients in a psychic capacity and doing that kind of work.
Mm.
And it didn't take me long. It didn't take me long for my spidey senses to be going off all over the place. I felt like I was robbing people of this opportunity to do this for themselves. Right. So
Wow.
here I was, and and there are certain, I 100% agree that intuitively guiding people, that using your intuition to have conversations with people and to share things with your friends or your clients, or all of that intuitively, I think is helpful. But when it comes to things like psychic readings and actually, telling people's future, you have to be really, really careful, because it is about sovereignty, and it is something that we all have within us. So I immediately changed my model. Like after that book, I changed my model. I said, I want to, that book teaches you how to do it. Right. But
Mm.
I didn't want to be doing it for other people. I wanted to dedicate my life wholeheartedly to help other people do it for themselves. And that has become sort of my mission, because and in terms of delegating it, we have prime directives at Intuition Lab. And one of them is, you never, ever take away anybody else's free will. You never tell someone, yes, you should do this. No, you should do this. Right. you can guide people, you can help people to listen to their own voice and to distinguish what their own voice is and get better in touch with that. But ultimately, we have to trust our own gut first. Our own intuition has to come ahead of anybody else's intuition or anybody else's judgment or what anybody else expects of us or thinks of us. At the end of the day, our own personal intuition has to be at the top of the triangle above all of those other voices. And that's how we get our life in the right order.
Mm. So thank you for that so much. It's very clear. And one of the things that identified you as a candidate for my agency to sell is that you have this extraordinary experience in tech, helping people in tech make the right decisions and trusting their intuition. So a business question that I certainly have as a result of observing you and your work and making whatever assumptions I know about it, is this, that, in some cases a business, and certainly in my case in publishing, most of the work we do is based on math, not content, and it's based on analytics. So is this person likely to have the kind of platform, the personality, the whatever other factors go into a platform that will indicate that this person is going to be successful and make us money with this book. So as an agent, I'm supposed to be the watchdog to say to a publisher, this author will make you money. One of the things that makes me believe that you will make money for the publisher is you have a business angle to it. But here's the piece that I'm interested in now, is that in a business, if you look at the analytics and the analytics say you should definitely make this product in a red package, let's just say, and all of your facts and your focus groups all say put it in a red package, you put it out in the red package and it does not do what it's supposed to do. Was your intuition wrong? Were your analytics, should you have followed the analytics? Should you have not? Should you have, what the heck are you supposed to do with that, Kim?
Yeah, these are great questions, and questions that I like this. I get a lot, especially when it comes to business. You have to really have both hats on. You have to have the hat of your intellect and that hat of your intuition. And the reason that I got so deeply involved in the intuitive space with technology and business is because I worked in innovation and creativity. So when you're designing new products, when you're deciding, are you going to make this red, or are you going to make this blue, or are we going to have this marketing campaign? Marketing is very creative. All of these creative applications of business are very much tied to our intuition, because yes, it's important. It's important to have this analytics framework. It's important to know our audience. All of these things are so important. But I kind of look at it as, you sort of have this foundation. Analytics and the business knowledge systems, so to speak, are the foundation. But your intuition is that sort of cherry on the top that makes it extraordinary, right? You can follow everybody else and do what everybody else is doing, and you can be good enough. You can be great, even. You can appropriate what other people are doing and use the same tools that other people are doing. But when you add that secret sauce of your intuition on top of it, that's when your product becomes extraordinary. That's when you touch that extraordinary success, when you're doing something that nobody else is doing, but it's a good thing that nobody else is doing, because you have that analytics base, that solid understanding underneath it all to back it up. So you're not just out there doing crazy stuff. You're balancing both sides of this process, and it's so important with business. And the problem in the past with business is that we haven't been intuitive enough. We've just relied on the statistics. We've just relied on, the sort of old boys network banking philosophy of business that is just gone now. Right now that we've brought in the feminine side, the intuitive side, the creative side, and business, the look of business has changed. Apple is the really the perfect example of this, that what Steve Jobs has done and what they've done with innovation, really balancing the creative side with the technical side and bringing it all together. So, and sure, there's going to be some misses. There's always going to be misses. There's going to be experiments, and that's part of the intuitive process too. It's failing forward and experimenting and trying new things, because remember, it's a process. So even though that red might not have worked this time, you might have learned something for it. So the next time you come out, you're going to do something and you're going to nail it.
Interesting. So this comes up a lot in my own path, and I'm going to ask you a question based on my own life, if I may. I often try and find ways to help authors, and one of the things that most authors have a challenge with, and I only handle nonfiction, as you know, so is writing a book proposal. So I've been teaching book proposal writing all of my career. I've been doing this 30 years, and since 91, so I guess not 30 years, but since 91, I've been teaching book proposal writing. Usually I've done it in every format. I've done it standing in front of a group. I've done it over a weekend. I've brought in editors over the weekend. I've done it live. I've done it in video. I've done it in cassette tapes. I mean, I've done it every 6 ways to Sunday. And until I had the idea of building the book proposal workshop that you went through at bookproposalworkshop.com. That's not a shameless plug, guys. I'm just trying to
Oh, I
get
highly
an answer.
recommend it.
But thank you. But what I'm trying to say is that, until I built bookproposalworkshop.com and then I started actually teaching in a different way, I wasn't able to get the results I'm getting, right? And I wasn't able to create the impact. And I do my work because I know that I can write. I'm very confident. I'm successful. I could make a full-time living as a writer, unlike many people who think they can. I've got the proof. But it's not really what I want to do. I like also empowering other writers, which is why most of my life is spent doing that. I get a kick out of it for a number of reasons, some of them spiritual, but a lot of them financial, frankly. 15% of the money that X number of people make is more money than you can make on one book. So the point is that when I started the book proposal workshop, it was partly to get new clients, and it was also partly to really help people who would go on either to understand how their material needs to be modified or be represented by other agents, right? So here I am, I'm building this, and finally, after 30 years in the business, I have a model that works the best. Why would intuition not have given me this idea all those years ago, so I could have helped that many more people achieve their goal?
I know, and I literally asked myself that same question. Like when I was in the depths of writing my manuscript, and the creative process is sometimes, and I was just like, universe, why can't I just write it perfectly the first time? Like, why is it coming out? Why do I have to go back through time and time again and struggle? And because that's the way life works, because we learn, right? We learn. You couldn't have done it that way.
I don't like that answer, Kim.
I know. It just, and I feel you 100% because I have totally been there. But my answer for that, and my own experience for that, is that it is a creative process that all those other times that you were doing those, you learned little things that added up to make that the best thing. And probably technology helped too, because you didn't have the technology back then.
Yes, that's true. That's very true.
And by the way, I'm not, just for a shameless plug, that workshop is money, okay? Because I'm a good writer, but good writers don't always write good book proposals. So highly recommend.
Thanks, Kim. Thank you very much. That's it's been so exciting to see the results from it. And I like all the things you've been saying, and they certainly have given me and probably everyone who's ever going to hear this, a lot of food for thought. I love how insightful you are about being insightful.
Thank you.
So I would love to know what you personally use as a litmus test when you are deciding whether it's intuition, ego, intellect, or whatever else. What do you personally use?
Well, in intuition, I have a whole checklist that I made of different criteria.
Is it in the book? Can we get it?
Yes, it's going to be in the book too. Yes.
Woo-hoo!
Yes.
I'm going to get a free copy, but you guys have to pay for yours. Ha.
That's right. So in the book as well, there will be a checklist of all of the things that are qualities of a genuine intuition and qualities of something that's not intuition. And because I'm like getting very like surgical about this, so that we can just bring it into our consciousness, so that you can actually say, oh, okay, so this, I might have a fear associated with this, so it's not an intuition, or this is somehow this or that. So there's a lot. So there's not like a singular test, but really truly, just to give you something here today to take with you if you want to start to put it to the test within you. First, you want to ask yourself if you have any personal attachment to the outcome, right? Because that's something we've talked about a lot today, is really is our judgment and our thoughts. So when we're using it in our place, talking about the power now and the kind of work of the mindful work that's really laid the foundation for this insightful work, because we want to get into this space of no mind. We get to this place where we've quieted our mind, where we've turned off that rat race, so that we're not projecting all of our aspirations and desires and fears onto our intuitions. So if you have a thought or an idea that you think is an intuition, step back from it and think, okay, is this something that makes me excited and feel like I have an opportunity to grow, right? Because that's the goal of intuition. So it's real intuition is always going to feel uplifting and expansive. But at the same time, it's not something that's emotionally and something that's tied into something that is maybe a subjective goal. So you want to step back from your feelings. And then once you do that, is your just that same intuition still abide? Because this is one of the characteristics of intuition. It abides. So you have this thought or idea. A fleeting thought or idea can come and go. Like we might get, oh, this is a great idea, I should do it. And then we forget about it and it's like whatever. So it might have just been something passing in the wind, you know? But a real genuine intuition will abide and you can go back to it. And that's that urgency, that strength, that push, that call remains. And that goes back to what you said earlier about waiting, right? Of if, you know, if there isn't a path, then maybe there isn't a choice to be made at that moment. You
Mm-hmm.
wait, take some time, take a breath and go back to it. If that abides and from that calm, still place of inner power, then it's very likely your intuition because it's still, it's calm, and it abides. Those are characteristics of a real intuition.
That is super cool. And it makes me think of this. So, two things actually. The one is I think that intuition is drowned sometimes, real intuition is sometimes drowned by the perception of massive effort required to bring it into manifestation.
So true.
So people say, oh my God, I have this great idea for a book, but I haven't had time to write it. I was telling a publisher I was speaking with yesterday that we have an author in common that I introduced to him. And for 19 years, she's been telling us she's going to send us something on her book for 19
Wow.
years. And this book is one of the best ideas I've heard in my career. 19 years. She hasn't written it because she's so worried about how much work it's going to be. Meanwhile, she's retired and now in failing health. And I don't know that she's not only going to have time to write it, but I don't know that she's going to be able to promote it if it comes out because she's not well and she's old. So that's a problem. But this leads in directly into something else. One of my friends, Mark Victor Hansen, who's the co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul, he told me this one time. We were chatting about this concept, and I was telling him why in my career sometimes I'll see a similar book proposal twice in a week or 50. And when I started by selling screenplays, and we used to make people sign this document that said, before we can consider your screenplay, this was with the agent I started with, it said other material that is similar or identical may exist. And the thing that blew my mind in my first year of working for him was that we would get a screenplay about a man and a woman living in a country town in Wyoming, and their names were, I don't know, Brenda and John. And the next screenplay we would get would be about, Cindy and Mark living in South Dakota. And it was like, what?
Yep.
And the thing that Mark Victor Hansen told me about intuition that really changed my perception on this phenomenon that I have seen 1,000 times in my life is this. He said, the universe, God, Jesus, Buddha, whatever you call it, the universe sprinkles the same idea on 100,000 heads. And out of that, 1,000 people take the first step and 100 people follow it through, some too quickly, some without content, some without awareness, some without skill, some without knowledge. And one of them makes it to the finish line. One of them becomes Eckhart Tolle. One of them becomes Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield Chicken Soup for the Soul. One of them becomes Kim Chestney. That's what happens. And I think that is such a powerful representation of intuition. When I get an idea, sometimes I think, thank you, this is not for me right now, because I know it's being passed on to everybody or many people simultaneously.
That is such a wonderful story. I'm so glad you shared that because that's absolutely, absolutely how it is. And it's like, many are called, only a few follow, right? And
Yes.
there is it. All of this stuff is out there, and and I always say it's, in using technological terms, is all of the information in the world is in that cloud, that storage cloud that's all around us, and
So
any
true.
of us can download it. And if you don't download it, if you don't do something about it, someone else is going to. That's the reality of it, because all of this stuff wants to come into the world. All this stuff wants to manifest and wants to bring this new energy into our lives. And so that's sort of our jobs, is to do this. So I was talking about intuition as a two-part process. It's knowing and recognize our intuition, but it's also acting on it. right? It's not enough to just get an idea. We actually have to act on it and follow it and be dedicated and devoted to that idea. And that's where the hard work comes in. And if we're not willing to do that hard work, it's the universe isn't going to say like, well, so much for that idea. I guess it's not happening. You know what I mean? You're the one person that could do it.
Which is interesting, when you look at that from like Don Miguel Ruiz in The Mastery of Love talks about, people say, well, it's just not my destiny or it's not my karma. It's like, well, you know what? You could make it your karma if you wanted it to be.
Right.
If you got the idea and it's really intuition, freaking just start. The journey of 1,000 miles, first step.
Yeah.
You could give yourself permission to be whatever it is you want to be. And then on the flip side of that, I have a close personal friend right now who often tells me that he has never, ever had intuition and never had a passion in his life. And this is a person who comes from a very complicated background. And I look at his relationship with his wife and kids, and I think he's carrying it forward in some ways, that before you can get out the gate, before you can have that intuition, immediately your brain snaps shut and goes, no, it can't be me. No, they can't mean me. No. I wish I had words, Kim, to help this person accept that it's possible that we are all inspired in many ways throughout the course of a lifetime.
Yeah, he sounds like my husband.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it's been wonderful though, because he's been a great sort of source of challenge for me and me for him, because we inspire each other, and that way it helps me to make the message stronger, because if I can get through to him, I can get through to anybody.
That's so cute.
Because he's military, he has this background which is very ritualistic, very methodical and formulaic. So, but he's also very thoughtful, spiritual person. So, getting past some of those ideas that people have, it takes a little time to break through, but hopefully in his own time, he'll come to see.
So I think for someone who goes through their life believing that they don't get intuition or they don't get creative sparks or whatever they're going to call it, I wonder if there's a way to dip their toe or help them dip their toe into what it feels like. Because I have a feeling in the case of my friend that he actually thinks that the universe is going to drop, I picture the cartoon character on a fish hook, dropping a note in front of the fish on a fish hook. I think that's how he thinks it works. And I have tried to explain that that's not how it works for me. Mm-hmm. It's this still small voice kind of thing. But I think other people expect it to show up with, fanfare on a billboard. What do you say to that?
Yeah, because it really can be such a subtle process, and it's not something that it's like you don't need crystal balls and all the pageantry around intuition. It's really, you know what I mean? Like that's what people
totally
get in their head, right? That's what they think you need. But really, it's just a part of us, the way that we're wired, and the people that are sort of afraid of that side of them or don't want to look at that side of them. I think a lot of that has to do with upbringing, and sometimes I think it has to do with control, because when you are consciously in control of your life and you are your mind and you're methodical, then you sometimes feel safer for some people. Sometimes intuition, the unexpected nature of it, the creative nature is gets people out of their comfort zone, and it can be difficult. And for some people, it's never going to happen. I mean, that's the reality. Like, I know people in my life that, I've tried to talk with about this stuff, and that's just not the way they're wired at this point. But maybe down the road, maybe years from now, things might change. But, you know what I mean? Some people, it just depends on where they are and what happens to them.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting. I would say that, my life certainly changed on a dime. And opened me up to things I would never, ever, ever have even considered. I was raised in such a strict environment.
Right.
And as you know, I went through a personal tragedy in spring of 91, and it gave me the ability to see in a way that I would never have been able to see, and there's a story I'm not a Christian anymore, but there's a story in the Bible about a guy named Saul, and the scales fell off of his eyes, which I think means I think that means he had cataracts, but I don't know.
Mm.
Anyway, the scales fell off of his eyes and suddenly he could see, but they also mean seeing spiritually. And I
Right.
think that sometimes our intuition leads us into dark places or painful places for the benefit of expanding our ability to have compassion toward ourselves and others, to be more merciful, more empathetic, more aware, more loving, more insightful into the struggles of others. I think that the great losses and tragedies and failures and pain in our lives gives us, although no one would sign up for it, such an opportunity to engage with the world in a different way.
I couldn't agree with you more. The seed starts to germinate in the darkness under the ground, right? And that is such a good metaphor for the pain and the suffering that we might feel like we're surrounded in darkness, but all of those things that we're facing and that we're working through, they make us stronger. They give us the fuel that we need to, when we come back, to understand other people, for one thing, and what other people are going through, and to, like you said, have that empathy and to have that human experience. And that's part of being human. We're not here to just sit on a top of a mountain and be, right? We're here to grow and evolve and change. And sometimes, sometimes that hurts. Sometimes shedding our skin doesn't come in a way that feels good. But ultimately, when we look back on it, it's something that was for our own good and was for the best. And you can't always see it at the time. And that's the big message with intuition when you're in those dark places. And I know you went through some very, very horrible times, and I have gone through some dark times in my own life as well. And in those moments, that's the time when your intuition is there for you more, even though you might not feel it. It's there for you, and listening to it and listening to that lifeline, it really can be that lifeline that pulls you out and gets you back into that power where yourself is.
Beautiful. Really beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
This has been wonderful. I really appreciate this conversation. Do you have any other questions about intuition before we wrap things up?
Well, I think that you have done such a great job of answering that I'm probably going to have to call you every week now, between now and a year after the book releases. This has been really a lot of fun and interesting, and I always enjoy you. And this has been the chance to, record this and potentially share it with others has been a lot of fun too, because so much of what you say is useful. And I think in this environment, people learn through different modalities. I think reading the book and hearing you and attending, workshops, or maybe even, retaining you in your firm to get the kind of help that a business or a person needs. I think this is such a privilege to have people in the world who are stepping up to say, you can do this too. It's not a gift set aside for a tiny percentage of the population. And thank you so much, Kim, for making it accessible to everyone, no matter where they're coming in on the I'm an intuitive person or not spectrum. Thank you
Exactly.
so much. And thanks for taking time to chat with me. It's been a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
and thank you for being here and really for all you do for empowering. I mean, you do so much to empower creative people to let their intuition out into the world and really to live their dreams. So it's been a pleasure having you. And for those of you watching, listening, you can learn more about Wendy and all the amazing stuff that she's doing on her website at wendykeller.com or Keller Media. And I am so grateful for your time today, Wendy. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Kim. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.